Sup? I'm reliably informed that I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. You can buy most of that shit that I make over at post-mort.com. Hope to see you there. All this riot and uproar. V, is this anarchy? Is this the land of do as you please?
No, this is only the land of take what you want. Anarchy means without leaders, not without order. With anarchy comes an age of ordnung, of true order, which is to say, voluntary order. This age of ordnung will begin when the mad and incoherent cycle of Verwirrung that these bulletins reveal has run its course. This is not anarchy, Eve. This is chaos.
We live in interesting times, and I've been wanting to do a more long-form video where I sort of set the world to rights, lay out a manifesto, if you will, but things interfere and the world moves on, and the kind of things that I like to comment on, whether trivial or political, they keep happening. As you may have gathered, I'm quite frustrated by the mess that we're all in now. I regard the problem as being primarily one of economic disparity, of class, not race. So I find this whole mess frustrating on all sides. And my position on the rioting and so on, if you follow me on social media, might seem a bit all over the place or even a bit incoherent, but I'm going to try and lay some of that out here. But this video is primarily about Trump seeking to declare Antifa to be a terrorist organization. We're in the midst of a huge pandemic. America has ballsed it up almost as badly as the UK has, probably worse in the long run. And in the midst of all this, we have police violence sparking off more riots and protests and all kinds of problems. Lots of people take this as being some kind of vindication that their views on the poor or their racially bigoted views are somehow validated. But plenty of other people, the kinds of people that are going to have to be persuaded if any sort of wholesale change is ever going to take place, a whole lot of them are disturbed at the violence and the death and the damage that is being done by the riots and the riot/protests and the pure riots that are going on. Property damage is really not much of anything next to human life. But it's understandable why these people might be put off or upset or would withhold or withdraw their support for something that they otherwise support when they see neighbourhoods being burned down. And a lot of people don't understand what's going on or why someone angry at the government or the police force would burn down their own neighbourhood. It's hard for a lot of people to understand. It doesn't mean that they're racist or unsympathetic or unempathetic. They understand, but they find this kind of response unacceptable. You know, they value order. There are ways to redress the balance legally through protest and court cases and so on. And unlike a lot of previous cases, things seem to be moving reasonably swiftly in the legal arena, at least last time I checked. So why are people looting? Well, we live in a rampantly consumerist society where a lot of these people are surrounded by the trappings of success, the things that are constantly sold to them as being, you must own this to be a worthwhile human being. Your heroes own these things. You should own these things. This is what a good life is, to own the latest iPhone, a big flat screen TV, whatever it might be. That is what they're told constantly, and yet it's always out of reach. Unless you're incredibly lucky to be able to break out of whatever social stratum you're born into. And America has terrible social mobility. Or if you turn to crime, but then that's unacceptable to society at large. So it can feel like you're utterly trapped, and you're surrounded by the trappings of consumerism and success and luxury all the time, which just rubs your face in the fact that you can't have it. So why do people loot? Because they're told that they should want these things, because capitalism and consumerism have won. And yet it leaves so many people behind while stoking and creating a desire for these things. So if the opportunity arises to get the flat screen TV, the latest iPhone, whatever it might be, for free, people are going to take it. They are going to take radical measures to redistribute the manifestations of that wealth in the broader society. And we leave people behind in a lot of societies. And America doesn't have a particularly good welfare system. It doesn't redistribute its wealth. It barely socially invests. So this is the only real opportunity that these people have. So why wouldn't they take it? I mean, we can look back to the Cold War. Look at Berlin. Half of Berlin lived under communism, authoritarianism, where they had very little, and the other half had plenty. And you could literally see from one side to the other, in a situation that sadly hasn't particularly been replicated in Korea. You could see how the other half lived, and the downfall of East Germany was as much to do with Levi jeans and decent places to live and consumerism as it was politics and miscommunication and all the other problems that led to it. If wealth disparity, if comfort, security, if these things are enough to bring down countries, they're certainly enough to bring down neighborhoods. Now that was capitalism versus what was ostensibly communism or ostensibly socialism. But our own systems, neoliberal capitalism, though I hate that as a term because it's not new, it's not liberalism, it's not particularly capitalistic in a way that an anarcho-capitalist or a libertarian would recognize it, but still, that consensus leaves a lot of people behind. It doesn't allow them to engage with what we deem to be success. And like I say, if that can bring down a country, it can certainly bring down a neighborhood. So why do they smash up their own neighborhood? Why do they burn it down? Because that's their prison. That's where they are. That's where they encounter all of these horrible things. So it's completely understandable, but it's also tactically incredibly dense. It's also understandable why people react badly to property damage, and it's not just property damage that's going on. And this seems to be spreading. Now, I'm frustrated because I see this as class conflict, not race conflict. I hate the way in which both sides of the American political coin confuse class issues and race issues. The way in which the working class and the underclass is prevented from consolidating and coming together and working for the same things that would benefit all of them by these artificial divisions like race. It's immensely frustrating, but it is also understandable because the one thing and the other, they coincide. The Venn diagram overlaps, certainly in terms of people's lived experience, if not statistically. A lot of this unrest is also connected to COVID, and that's also a class issue. The poor, the hoi polloi, are being told to go and die for the sake of people's businesses. So why shouldn't they burn down a business? Joblessness is currently huge, and for most Americans, medical care is intimately tied to joblessness. To having a job, not to joblessness. You lose it when you lose your job. So a lot of people are essentially being hung out to dry, doubly. America has no decent safety net, and it's intensely suspicious and bureaucratic and inefficient and ineffective because the American society does not believe in it. It's all very well living in a stripped-down, turbocharged economy, so long as you're driving your economic supercar down an autobahn that nobody else is on. But when the wheels fall off, you're going to wish you were in a Volvo, a nice, safe, reliable Volvo with all manner of safety devices in it. So how does all of this relate back to Trump, which is, remember what this video is actually about, blaming Antifa and wanting to declare them to be a terrorist organization? I mean, never mind the fact that he doesn't particularly have the authority to do that, or that Antifa isn't a particularly organized group, that anyone can call themselves Antifa or operate as Antifa. Yeah, all it takes is a hoodie and what we used to call black bloc, and away you go. You can declare yourself to be Antifa. People can blame Antifa for anything you do. So why does Trump choose now, in the middle of a pandemic, a deadly pandemic, with the economy even more in the toilet than when he started dicking with it, and riots going on all over the country? Why now? Well, you have to understand that in Trump's media bubble, in his influencer bubble, Antifa are being seen as the instigators, the ones setting off the riots, flooding in and turning the protests violent. That's the story you'll find on right-wing media and in right-wing conspiratorial Twitter. This is the story that you're going to find there, right? That this is all down to left-wing communist infiltrators and agitators and all the rest of it. Meanwhile, on the other side, you're going to see people claiming that it's all police infiltrators, or the far right joining in on the protests, or setting up counter-protests and triggering the violence. It's probably all of these things, and the police. It's a lot of stuff. But in Trump's bubble, it's Antifa. Antifa are to blame. They're the ones that are turning what should be a simple protest into violence. And so he lashes out. Right? Even though he doesn't really have the authority, even though Antifa isn't an organization in a traditional sense. And people will lap this up, as they will lap up his attacks on Twitter and so on, despite claiming to be all in favor of free expression and political speech and all the rest of it. It doesn't really matter, because he's in the right tribe, and they're in the right tribe. And he's hearing that it's all Antifa, and they're hearing that it's all Antifa. And meanwhile, on the other side, there's an equal amount of bias going on in how people hear this. So that's why it seems weird, it seems out of left field to anyone in the centre or on the left, but that's why. And, it's not that hard to understand why Antifa might be blamed. They have been responsible for a lot of violence. They have turned a lot of protests into riots. Yeah, okay, right-wing terror groups, yeah, more deaths, etc., etc. But that doesn't make Antifa blameless. That's an argument from relative privation. Two things are capable of being bad at the same time, even if one is less bad than the other. But when people are getting their heads smashed in for listening to some twat like Milo Yiannopoulos speak, that's an issue. When lectures and discussions are shut down because Antifa decides to roll up and censor people's speech, that's an issue. That's also why there's going to be very little sympathy for Antifa. And also this ridiculous argument that it just means anti-fascist, so that's all they are. Well, the Nazis called themselves socialists. They weren't. North Korea calls itself democratic. It isn't. Antifa claim to be anti-fascist, but a lot of the time they are treading on people's free expression, right to gather, right to speak, and they're using violence to shut it down. That's the behaviour of a fascist, not an anti-fascist, or at least an authoritarian. So you can be anti-fascist without being Antifa. And then there is precedent for loose, unaffiliated groups that just have some kind of broadly similar philosophy for being designated as terrorists. Al-Qaeda. It's not really an organisation, it's a label that various groups and cells and even individuals can slap on themselves. But that didn't stop us declaring them to be a terrorist organisation. And how well has that whole war on terror thing gone? Not very. It's stupid, but it's understandable. Just as the property damage is stupid but understandable. Tactically, it's an own goal, but understandable. Burning down your own neighbourhood and beating up people as a rioter, yeah, tactically stupid, but understandable. It's all understandable if you understand the way in which these media currents are working now. Nobody trusts anything. There is no official version of reality. Everyone's in their own little bubble. On one side, it's the police and the fascists kicking off trouble. On the other side, it's Antifa, or racial agitators, or grifters, or whatever else kicking off trouble. When you understand that, and you understand how vindictive Trump is, then it makes sense. And if you're agreeing that Antifa should be declared a criminal organisation, consider the precedent that would set, where just any loose affiliation with some kind of vague political ideology, not even an ideology, a singular political idea, could get your group or your organisation that's affiliated to that in some way, despite perhaps having a more coherent philosophy. Imagine how that could then be demonised and declared, and how that would trample on your rights. What if the next president is someone genuinely very left-wing, but with a more authoritarian bent than someone like Bernie Sanders? What if they declared some sort of vague conservative idea to be terrorist? Seeing a lot of people with a lot of double standards, and it's weird because I appear to be all over the place on these things when I'm just trying to understand everyone and understand what's going on. And my position is consistent, but it appears inconsistent to other people because they're inconsistent. This isn't a good thing. The attack on social media is not a good thing. But you know what? Burning down your neighbourhood and looting isn't a particularly good thing either. It's understandable, but it's not a good thing. Everyone's in their own bubble and lashing out on the basis of, at best, half the information. You can't solve a problem if you don't properly diagnose it. Zang. Old Fat Punks is part caper, part comedy, part nostalgia, and part commentary. It follows three aging punks as they build themselves up for one big, nihilistic last hurrah. You can buy Old Fat Punks at Amazon, Drive-Thru Fiction, or Lulu.com. Follow the links below or search on those sites.
It's a lie!